and a pleasure to introduce the Reverend Dr. William Reist as tonight's speaker for the DeVoe and Catherine Free Contemporary Christian Lecture Series. He is most familiar as Pastor Bill, a preacher who retired from active ministry last summer. While he stepped down from the pulpit, his sermons, it seems, lingered. His messages remembered. Worshippers were faithful in their attendance on Sunday mornings, and they have recalled his words, passages from his sermons, his prayers, and his attention. As one parishioner said, his messages gathered us together in a dignified worship. Soft-spoken and reassuring, his presence offered a calming presence to the experience of worship. A servant leader, Pastor Bill's messages were informed with diligence and faithfulness to God. In everything he did, there was, as a minister colleague described, always an undercurrent of joy, pure joy. There is, a worshiper noted, a transparency about Pastor Bill that endears him to others. Perhaps it is the spiritual connection to the earth, with his upbringing rooted in the farming communities and the Mennonite culture in Pennsylvania, that helped shape who he would become as a man of God. Bill continually seeks an answer to the question, what does God have to say to us today? He is in constant conversation with God, noted a young parishioner. Those who worked with Bill on a daily basis continue to be in awe at the delicate and seamless way he moved between his responsibilities to the church, to the greater community, and to the university. As one of the longest active UF Board of Trustee members, he has served on a number of committees that have made a positive difference in the life of the campus and in the health of the university. Bill understands the language of our young people. He appreciates their wealth of energy, their freshness of new ideas, acknowledges their extraordinary vision, creativity, and resiliency, and he recognizes in them the future of the church. He's tireless, his colleagues noted. He's always thinking of ways to improve the quality of life, working for the betterment of a society that is best defined by its diversity, and always working as a man of God called to serve God's people. He is comfortable in any situation and can strike up a conversation with anyone, anywhere, and engage in long talks with perfect strangers. Those young adults who traveled with you to Scotland would be able to confirm that, I think. He listens well and provides good counsel. This is a quote from a parishioner. He is a sincere person. He fully invests himself in supporting others. It is fairly obvious, wrote another, that Bill's personal identity grows out of his intense belief in the gospel and in Jesus Christ. I know he prays for me, a parishioner said. He drove miles to see me, to comfort me, and to reassure me of God's presence. The conversation with Bill, he noted, easily equated to hours of relief. Another added, he's always ready to pray with and for me and he's open to discussing those tough questions nobody wants to ask and nobody wants to answer. Bill upholds the Christian values in our community, appreciating the diversity of churches in Hancock County, and introducing to the Ministerial Association a project called Bless the City that became the Backyard Mission Trip Project. He and Monsignor Hohenbrink collaborated with others on the Backyard Mission Trip Project, working to organize hundreds of volunteers who would continue to contribute thousands of hours to benefit the less fortunate in our community. By all accounts, this continues to be a successful, collaborative venture with multiple churches and church leaders involved. His mission trips have taken him to Haiti to help in the building of a church. His presence on such trips tends to make, this is a quote, the going much smoother. Because you know, as a parishioner remarked, Bill is a peacemaker. We know. He is a gentle man of God who finds an undercurrent of joy, pure joy in everything he does. Please welcome Dr. Bill Reist.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for being here. Thanks to all those who had such kind comments to say. As I was listening to that, I wondered who in the world you're talking about. But thank you so much for sharing. I want to begin this evening with a bit of a review of the DeBow and Catherine Freed Contemporary Christian Lecture Series. It started as a brainchild in 2010, 2011. Byron Pitts, 60 Minutes anchor, was here. 2012, Kathleen Norris, author and poet. 2014, we had a blank year in 13, Dr. Walter Brueggemann. 2015, Father Gregory Boyle. 2016, our very own Dr. Louis Stuhlman. 2017, early in the fall, Dr. Adam Levine from the Toledo Museum of Art, and then later in the fall, Monsignor Hohenbrink shared a word about his lifetime of service to the Roman Catholic Church. And I share this brief history for two reasons. The one is to recognize Dr. Freed and to say thank you for the gifts that you have given to the university. You have made this university a much better place. You have certainly built on the foundation that was laid for you, as Paul would say, but you have increased the standard of academic excellence, the scholarship and creativity symposium. The university hosts 3 different professional fraternities, societies, honor societies, which, by the way, are not easy to become a member of. There was one application that was discarded until the university made some adjustments and did make those adjustments. You have served well, and we want to say thank you for your gift, Dr. Freed, to the University of Findlay. The second reason that I share this brief history of the Freed Lecture Series, and it has to do with the diversity of professions that persons bring to the lecture series. Art, literature, broadcast journalism, community development, biblical studies, church development. They are wide-ranging disciplines with one common core, and that is Jesus. And it speaks to the breadth of Jesus' transformation in our, at least Western culture. John Ortberg, PhD in clinical psychology of all things, who is a very effective pastor, has a book I would commend to you called Who Is This Man? And the big idea of the book is that Jesus has touched across Western culture nearly every domain and transformed it. He quotes, Ortberg quotes Yaroslav Pelikan, the former, he's now deceased, historian at Yale, who begins his book, Christ for the Centuries, in this way. Regardless of what anyone may personally think and believe about Jesus, he has been the dominant figure in the history of Western culture for 20 centuries. If it were possible, with some sort of super magnet, to pull out of history every scrap of metal bearing at least a trace of his name, how much, Pelikan says, would be left? And you think about the way Jesus has changed all the domains of, or most of the domains of our culture. Ortberg says children would be thought of differently because of Jesus. His treatment of women led women to join the movement in record numbers. His teaching of human sexuality would destroy the double standard that had been encoded into Roman law. He never wrote a book, but his followers did and preserved them in libraries. Thomas Cahill, How the Irish Saved Civilization. I think that's just one precocious title. How the Irish, anybody here Irish descent, just say thank you, Lord. How the Irish saved civilization. It was Patrick's Christian mission that nurtured Irish scholarship into blossom. The first Irish Christians became the first Irish literates. And then he goes on in the book to talk about this preservation of written material was able to carry Europe through the so-called Dark Ages. Again, Cahill, on the effect of the Christian faith in Ireland as a result of Patrick, quote, a Christian culture where slavery and human sacrifice became unthinkable, and warfare, though impossible for humans to eradicate, diminished markedly. And then going on with Ortberg, he talks about hospitals and other domains of, especially Western society, changed by this person, Son of God, Jesus. So the free lecture invites us to reflect on the profound way that Jesus has changed all of human, at least the Western human world. And two other illustrations, one from China, not part of the Western world. You may know that the Cultural Revolution, 1966, caused all the Westerners largely to leave China. It was estimated that there were 2 million Christians in China in 1966, and from that point on, missionaries were expelled, Bibles confiscated, churches closed, believers persecuted or killed, and the Western influence largely vanished from China, to an extraordinary amount of hand-wringing and teeth-gnashing of the Western church. What will become of the church in China? 1976, with the death of Premier Mao, the bamboo curtain was lifted in the early 80s, late 70s, and then early 80s. The Western world was invited back into China, and they found, much to their amazement and, I suspect, chagrin, 60 million Christians. From 2 to 60 in a place where Christians were being persecuted. And they say the estimate now is in these middle years of the teens in the 21st century, a double to 120 million Christians. And this is not because people were coerced into a Christian faith. It was because people fell in love with Jesus, if I may be so asked to say, he changed my life. And I'm willing to give my life because I love him and will follow him. The other story, persons from College First have heard me tell this repeatedly, comes from Rodney Stark's Rise of Christianity. It's the title of his book. He asked the question, how in the world did we go from 120 or so people in the upper room in 30-ish, the day of Pentecost, to, if you move forward in history to AD, or the Common Era, depending on your preference, 350. It is estimated that there were 30 million Christians. Half the Roman Empire was Christian in those 300 years. That's a 40% growth rate per decade. And Rodney Stark says it's because when the Romans decided to leave town, especially in the plagues, Christians stayed and cared for and nurtured those who were ill. Some of them contracted the plague and died. But there were many, as a result of care, who survived and who thrived as a result of this Christian witness. And can you imagine the effect when people said, I love Jesus more than anything, that I will live out my faith, even if it costs me my life? Persons would say, I want what you have. And that's Ortberg's point. Jesus was such a profound impact on the Western world that there's hardly a domain of human existence that has not been transformed by him. And Cahill closes his Irish piece by saying, if civilization is to be saved, taking the title, then he says, forget civilizations. Patrick would say, it may pass in a moment like a cloud or smoke scattered upon the wind. If we are to be saved, it will not be by the Romans. And he says elsewhere, the Romans, rich and powerful, run things the way they want and must always accrue more because they think it will all run out and there will not be enough to go around. Does that sound somewhat familiar? Empire builders. If we are to be saved, it's not by Romans, but by the saints, by people who believe that every person is a child of God and that God will provide. There is and you all know this, profound grace and love and mercy and healing and winsomeness and justice in the transforming presence of Jesus that draws people to himself, not to draw a crowd, but to change life. People who surrender to him spiritually and give their lives away for the sake of the kingdom in the world. And this Jesus, I would submit to you, is at the heart and the center of the Free Lecture Series. Which brings us to higher education and specifically the University of Finland, established in 1882 by the Church of God in North America. This picture, and by the way, you see the tall tower was lowered in 1912 because somebody was afraid in its instability it may come crashing and take out the 345 students who were here at the time. C.H. Forney, this comes from his history, a long, involved history of our denomination. He was a pastor. Forney was a pastor in East Pennsylvania for 40 years was editor of our first weekly and then monthly Church Advocate. He writes about the denomination's interest in establishing a college as early as 1844. And he pointed to Weinbrenner himself, who was educated at Dickinson College, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and studied theology in Philadelphia under the tutelage of Samuel Helfenstein. Weinbrenner wrote numerous articles in the Advocate, laying the seed and the foundation for a church school. He never got to see Findlay College. He died in 1860. But for the next 40 years, 1844 or so on, the church looked for places and challenged itself to raise money. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Kansas were all proposed locations. There was a conversation with Hillsdale College at one time about establishing a chair. John Weinbrenner's son, also named John, was appointed or elected the first professor. He thought about it for a month and then said, "I'm not going to go to Michigan." Sorry for any Michiganders. In the 1880s, local elderships deplored, this is Forney's words, the fact that the church had no school, and they demanded action. This is our tribe. By May of 1881, at the Triennial General Eldership, the eldership took action to proceed to procure a school. And before the eldership adjourned, it was a 10-day activity at the time. The word went out to Smithville, a little village 5 miles northeast of Worcester, and downtown to Findlay to say, what can you do? And both towns were at the ready. Come and visit. So the Board of Education of the church in July went to Smithville. They were promised a building and a little bit of land for free if the church would take a $5,000 mortgage. So the Churches of God is not particularly Scotch, but they said no to the idea, or they said, let's see what else there is. They came back to Findlay, met at the courthouse in a prearranged meeting. This is 1881. And Findlay offered the princely sum of $20,000 and 10 acres of ground in North Findlay. They had already worked out the north-south business that Marcia spoke about last week. And by August 1st, Findlay was notified that the church would locate in North Findlay. So, the Articles of Incorporation were drafted, the Board of 19 was named. In January of 1882, the papers were filed, and off we go. Treasurer reported in 1882 pledges and cash of $41,000 for a building, this building that would cost $60,000 to build. The board reported to the church that it would be nice to have an endowment of $100,000, and thus furnished, they said, the college would be placed on a permanent basis. Unfortunately, Forney writes frequently in these several paragraphs, actually several pages, but in this section about the founding of the college, he writes about the endowment frequently. In 1886, it had a balance of $17,000, the endowment. And in 1888, it had a balance of $163.33. But he goes on to write, by 1912, when he finished his history, so whatever, 26 years later, The balance in the endowment fund was $136,000. Students were 345, of which 18 were in the theology department. And one of the gratifying, these are Forney's words, one of the gratifying features of the college was its good moral tone and its spiritual atmosphere. Notwithstanding the absorbing business and financial activity, the primary mission of the college was conceived to be spiritual. To fulfill said mission, it was regarded as a high duty of presidents and faculties to seek to deepen the spiritual life of the students through religious training and example, as well as through intellectual development. Now, this is written admittedly from the perspective of the church, but Findlay College was a spiritual enterprise to deepen the spiritual life of students. In the front hall of Old Main, across from President Fell's office, is a plaque. Findlay College, founded 1882 by the Churches of God in North America to foster liberal education and Christian culture, a Christ-centered college, and then quoting Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This plaque was not placed in Old Main when it was built, or when it was dedicated, or by 1912. Forney would certainly have mentioned it. It comes sometime later. In 1896, our name was changed from the Church of God General Eldership to Churches of God General Eldership. So it's sometime after 1896. Ed Rosenberry thinks it might be the 50th anniversary of the college or something like that. But the point is, what does Christ-centered mean in that context and in our context? Is Forney's primary mission still, University of Findlay, to deepen the spiritual life of students? What does it mean for a college or a university to have a soul? What does it mean to be faith-based? What does this mean for us? And by the way, there is no shortage of conversation and tension between denominations, sponsoring denominations, and their college. There is one book entitled Uneasy Partners, which pretty well tells the tale. David Gill has a piece called Should God Get Tenure? He said he posted that, and there came back responses, no, he only published one document, and that was not peer-reviewed. Secondly, he said the first two students flunked out. And thirdly, he said the scientific community had a hard time replicating the original experiment. But the point Gill was trying to make was, should God have an assured place in the academy? And that's a serious question, regardless of who started the school. It's a large question for Christian higher education. We know, if you know any bit of history, Harvard, Yale, and all the rest of the colonials were started by the church to train pastors and Christian laypersons. And there's a whole drift, talk about mission drift, into secularization of these land-grant original schools. Robert Benny has a book entitled Quality with Soul. And he's going to bring together, I'll give it away now, he's going to bring together academic excellence and spiritual faith. And I am interested in his piece because I wanted to find, we had some conversation 30 years ago in the church about this very subject. And I thought I remembered somebody talking about several markers on a continuum. Benny, who was published after that convocation and symposium, talks about orthodox, critical mass, and then intentionally pluralistic and accidentally pluralistic. So you'll see here a kind of continuum from your left to right. He has some characteristics about each, but he says churches or church-related schools fit somewhere on that continuum, and not necessarily at any one particular place. There are parts of the body that may move at different places across this continuum. He then reflects on 6 different schools: Calvin, Wheaton, Baylor, Notre Dame, 2 Lutheran schools, St. Olaf, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, ELCA, and then Valparaiso, Missouri Synod, to give examples of the schools that have not left. There hasn't been extraordinary mission drift. They would stay near your left side of the continuum, either as Orthodox or critical mass schools. But then he draws the distinction between your left and your right side, the Orthodox and critical mass schools on one hand, and the pluralistic schools on the other. He says the difference is worldview. The difference is the way the school sees itself with regard to core creedal Christianity. Now, we're using St. Clive, C.S. Lewis, understanding of core Christianity. He talks about being in a hall. He says life is lived off in the rooms, but the common feature of this house is the hall. He says the meals and the fires are in these rooms, in these particularly different places, but there's a common core. And so, whatever stripe you come from, then he would say it is core creedal Christianity. Think of the Apostles' Creed, for example. It defines what it means to be Christian, that God created, that He created humankind in His image, that we all sinned and fell short of His glory, that He comes to get back to Himself all who belong to Him, to use Gardner Taylor's words. And that person is Jesus, who has come to redeem or save or restore. And out of the work of Jesus, He creates a new community called the church. And at the end of the age, in God's right time, God will come to restore to Himself all that belongs to Him. That's the gospel. That's the Christian faith, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to Himself. Then he says what separates the 2 to the left from the 2 to the right is this Christian worldview. And he suggests 3 words. First is, it is comprehensive. The other 2, it's unsurpassable and it's centered. But comprehensive is, it has some breadth to it, this core Christianity. It encompasses all of life. It's worth noting, Abraham Kuyper. Thank you, Mark. There is not a square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. The question is, can you say that? Is He sovereign? Can a school say that? He is sovereign over our life, and He says, this is mine. It is unsurpassable. That is, it has some depth. It cannot be replaced by a better account of reality, and it is central. That is, it is significant. Breadth, depth, significance. It addresses all the essential questions of life, meaning and purpose and conduct, and why are we here? This is worldview. And then he says what separates these 2 groups of schools and all of life is the way people look at life, either a Christian worldview or not. And he uses some categories to describe these: religion department, required courses in chapel and ethos, and so forth. I'll look at three. One is the public relevance of the Christian vision. That is to say, how thick is the Christian vision on a campus? It is pervasive, or it is privileged, or it is assured, or it is random. Public rhetoric: how does the school describe itself internally and externally? An unabashed invitation to an intentionally Christian enterprise, straightforward presentation as a Christian school, but inclusive of others. A liberal arts school with Christian heritage, a secular school with little allusion to Christian heritage. Faculty membership requirements. This will get blood boiling. To the left side of the continuum, nearly 100% with orthodoxy tests, which, yes, sign a document if you want to have tenure on the faculty, all the way critical mass to intentional representation to a haphazard sprinkling. You can tell where Benny's love lies. I swapped emails with Todd Jones, the president and general counsel of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities in Ohio. He oversees 40-some, 46 or 8 or so. And he acknowledges that Christian colleges in Ohio, conservative Christian colleges in Ohio, are experiencing growth. So I wrote to him and I said, he spoke to the faculty at the president's breakfast a couple weeks ago, and I wrote and I said, okay, give us the chapter and the verse on that. So he says there are 8 schools in his cohort: Bluffton, Cedarville, Cincinnati Christian University, Franciscan, Steubenville, God's Bible College, Malone, Mount Vernon Nazarene, Ohio Christian University. He says of those 8, he started with fall of 2010 and went to the fall of 2017. And he said they had a 12% increase when the rest of the private schools in Ohio had a 7% decrease. To be fair, Ohio Christian reported extraordinary growth, but if you could take that out, even if you would take that out, the other 6 Christian privates grew faster than the rest in the state. Findlay did not fare so well in those 8 years, so I lopped off either end of that, 2010 and 2017, and we look pretty good. But, let's just leave that. We know our own challenges. But the point is, there is an appeal among the population for the ethos that a committed Christian school will deliver to parents and students. The question is, what does it mean to be a Christ-centered college plaque? What does it mean to stay true to our roots, the continuum? Can we have quality with soul, the identity question? Robert Sloan, former president of Baylor, frames the question this way: can a university conceived as a Christian institution persevere and make significant contributions as an academic institution to our society? Which I think is a pretty good question. So, I offer 3 observations, and I'll start by saying, from my vantage point, the University of Findlay is intentionally pluralistic, to look at that continuum, leaning toward critical mass. There is an assured vision of a moderate understanding of the Christian faith on campus. I will say this straight away: the university is not controlled by the church, but frankly, it welcomes the church and expressions of faith. The university does not have to contend with a reactionary voice in the same way that other schools may have to contend. There's a strong presence among students here. Pastor Matt Ginter leads an extraordinary Christian ministries program along with Josiah and Evie Parkhurst. There are roughly between 150 to 300, depending on the activity, depending on the Revive service, 150 to 300 students involved in ministry. Matt thinks there are 400 different students out of, say, 16 close at hand undergrads. 25% of the population. It's not the critical mass that Benny talks about, but it is a significant number of students. Revive. So here's a Bible study, 50-some students around the table. Dave and Linda Draper have been leading this for a lot of years. Covenant Connect is some one-on-one small groups, a host of activities, movies, concerts, cookouts, prayer, service, you name it, and young people at the university are involved in ministry. Several students spoke last year at the baccalaureate service. Austin Gardner, basketball player, blew out his knee on 2 different occasions, lost portions of the season, wrote about that experience. And at the end, in the baccalaureate service, he made this statement: sometimes you are broken on the outside so that you can be healed on the inside. I found that an incredibly profound statement. And he spent time came to college as a Roman Catholic, stayed in his faith, and spoke out of his faith this season, ending on 2 different occasions, injury to his knee. Emily Teague, who's here this evening, I came to Findlay because I didn't want to be in a religious bubble. Marissa Pettis, an entering freshman raised in Pittsburgh, loves animals, wants to be a vet, went to her high school guidance counselor to say, "Who are the best schools that will prepare me to get into vet school?" Her high school guidance counselor had the wherewithal to say, this is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Penn State, all right, so we got that out of the way, Ohio State, and the University of Findlay. And she said, I want to go to the University of Findlay. And I sat with her and talked a bit about her experience. She's 4 weeks in. She said, I was raised in a parochial school. I went to mainstream high school. It was difficult to fit in. But she said, I became involved in FCA. There were 8 persons in my freshman year, and I helped provide leadership, and there are 80 persons in my senior year. And I want to give that same kind of leadership here at the University of Findlay, all to his glory and not my own. The students here, not all, but there is a critical mass of students who look out for the presence of Christ in this place. And the key is to work into the identity of the school, or work out of, continue to work on the identity of the university, to build an ethos where faith is respected and where it flourishes. Second observation, the board is committed to developing the university as a faith-based, or on its faith-based heritage. Recently, as part of its planning process, identified one of the strategic plans was to enhance church partnership, respect for matters of faith-based core values. And went through a bit of a planning process. We called a committee together, faculty members, folks from the church, the seminary, the community, and gave a questionnaire to the board, asking them to think about how important they thought this particular value was for the university how committed they thought the university should be to this particular value, and their personal commitment to this value. Every one of these, it was done on a Likert scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree, 1 to 5. The consensus, there were 11 questions, 3 answers to each question, 33. The core ranged between 4.24 and 4.72. It was closely connected and very strong. Agreed to strongly agree. So, just a couple of these questions. Each trustee agrees to respect and support the Christian grounding of the university. So here you see importance, 4.68. My view of the commitment that the board should place on this value, 4.68. And my personal commitment, 4.72. The president of the university professes Christian faith and agrees to respect and support the Christian grounding of the university. You see the numbers again, above 4.5, 4.6 and above. All beliefs and backgrounds, cultures are welcome, with a commitment to model openness and respect without necessarily agreeing or supporting a given position. And again, strong response and commitment by the board. The last one, the university fosters an atmosphere which may be clear and unapologetically described by the concept of and rather than or. Faith and reason, intellectual rigor and spiritual formation, meaningful lives and productive careers, shaping character and developing skills. And again, a very strong commitment by the board to these values of enhancing Christian or faith-based ethos on campus. So Gary harps the concept of and, underscores the conviction that the university can model to students in the world that it is possible for an entity or individual to profess a robust faith and still be good at serving others who do not believe the same. Maintaining a robust faith with integrity while serving those who do not agree is opportunity for the University of Findlay to be a thought leader in a culture that reduces faith to the lowest common denominator to get along. This can be a distinctive, this very open, welcoming atmosphere where we strengthen the Christian faith-based presence on campus while maintaining this open welcome can be a differentiator for us. So, the third observation, challenge is to develop language and ethos that sustains and encourages robust faith without coercion. And I would suggest that the deepest expression of meaningful life is found in a relationship with Jesus and in the Christian vision of the world. The challenge is to develop language that welcomes those who may not see it that way. Paul writes, I count as loss the surpassing worth of, everything but the surpassing worth of knowing Christ my Lord, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and share in his suffering, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. And for that, he was put to death. And it is not easy. I mean, he knew what he wanted, and he wanted everybody else to see it like he saw it. And he might have been, probably was, difficult to live with. I'm not suggesting we take that attitude, but to somehow create a language and an atmosphere that welcomes while still moves the needle in this robust faith. Is there a way that the university building on a heritage of 136 years could deepen a sacrificial serving faith for the sake of the kingdom and the world, while granting freedom for those who may not see it the same way? to integrate more intentionally faith and reason into every area of the university's life, and to live with this and high commitment and high welcome, rigorous thinking and passionate faith, focused truth and generous grace. So, a couple of invitations to move this conversation forward. I offer them, in some regard, I feel like I'm going to offer them and then run. I know where the back door is. But I'll start with the church, and that is to invite and encourage the Churches of God General Conference to increase its financial commitment to the university. I had a conversation with Lance about this. I will not tell you what he said, but let's just say that there are limited dollars to go around. But it's still a challenge that the church financially support the university. Secondly, to encourage all campus regular voluntary chapel services for faculty, staff, and students, in addition to Revive. This is not cutting in on any of Revive's turf. That would be held at a protected hour. So I know how the deans are going to see that. Not to exceed 40 minutes, high quality, attractive in both word and music, that would deepen a sense of community and explore some aspect of the Christian faith as it impacts the community here. Thirdly, encourage a faculty level faith and learning group that can keep the conversation moving and continue to gently embed this into the life and culture and the ethos of the university. Fourthly, solicit support to endow 2 faculty chairs, one in science that would be held by a Christian who is well able to integrate his or her faith in whatever discipline, bioethics or whatever discipline it is, as a way that we can see lived out in a natural way that Christians are scientists. The other, remembering a beloved faculty member and embedding in that statement, that chair, faculty member's Christian faith statement. Number 5, regularly include the campus pastor in meetings with the president's cabinet. Dr. Fell and I have talked about this. Number 6, include in the regular faculty orientation process a comprehensive exposition of the values of the university that undergird the faith-based nature of the university while welcoming those who do not share that faith. And then lastly, some interaction between the religious studies faculty and campus ministries. And we've talked in other settings about some particular ways of doing that. The university enjoys a unique place in the world of church-related higher education, neither controlled and dominated by the church, nor abandoned by the vision that gave her birth. This may be the best time for the University of Findlay, certainly a fortuitous opportunity for the university to strengthen her faith-based ethos, to embrace God's redemptive work in and for the world through Jesus, in lecture hall, dining hall, residence hall, and every other hall we have here, to welcome graciously and respectfully those who see it differently, and to deepen the spiritual lives not only of students, but of each of us on this wondrous journey. Thank you.